Okay, sorry, no, bro. Okay. Today I will present about React Native. Our group, next slide. Our group name is Overclock, and they are our group form member. Next slide. Okay, what is React Native? React Native is a JavaScript framework for writing React natively rendering mobile application for iOS and Android. It's based on React Facebook JavaScript library for building user interface, but instead of targeting the browser, it targets mobile platform. In other words, web developer can now write mobile application that look and feel truly native or from the comfort of a JavaScript library that we already know and love. For the plus, because most of the code you write can be shared between platforms, React Native made it easy to simultaneously develop for both Android and iOS. Okay, next, similar to React for the web, React Native applications are written using a mixture of JavaScript and HTML execute markup known as JSH. Then under the hood, the React Native bridge invoke the native rendering APIs in Objective-C for iOS or Java for Android. Thus, your application will render using real mobile UI component, not web view, and will look and feel like any other mobile application. React Native also expose JavaScript interface for platform APIs, so your React Native app can access platform feature like the phone camera or the user location. React Native currently supports both iOS and Android, so it is easier to use and has the potential to expand to future platforms as well. In this book, we cover both iOS and Android. The vast majority of the code we will write will be cross-platform, and yes, you can use React Native to build production React-ready mobile application. Anaconda, Facebook, and TestRabbit are already using it in production for user-facing application. So in the future, they will be used React Native for the future development. So next slide. The history of React Native. When Facebook first decided to make its service available on mobile device instead of building out a native app, like many thought that player at the time, they decided to run with a mobile web page based on HTML5. However, the solution didn't stand the test of time, leaving much room for UI and performance improvement. In fact, in 2012, Mark Zuckerberg admitted that the biggest mistake we made as a company was betting too much on HTML as opposed to native. So next slide. So developer experience. Firstly, I want to talk about if you ever develop for mobile before, you might be surprised by how easy React Native is to work with. The React Native team has baked strong developer tools and meaningful error message into the framework. So working with robust tools is a natural part of your development experience. For example, React Native is just JavaScript. You don't need to rebuild your application in order to see your changes reflected. Instead, you can hit Command plus R to refresh your application just as you would any other web page. So all of these minutes spent waiting for your application to build can really add up. And in contrast, React Native quick iteration cycle feel like a code stack. Okay, for additionally, React Native lets you take advantage of intelligent debugging tool and error reporting. If you are comfortable with Chrome or Safari developer tools, you will be happy to know that you can use them for mobile development as well. Likewise, you can use whatever text editor you prefer for JavaScript editing. React Native does not force you to work in Xcode to develop for iOS or Android Studio for Android development. For day-to-day improvement to your development experience, React Native also has the potential to positively impact your product release cycle. For instance, Apple permits JavaScript-based changes to an app behavior to be loaded over the air with no additional review cycle necessary. So all of those small facts add to saving you and your fellow developer time and energy. So it's allow you to focus on the more interesting part of your work and be more productive overall. So next slide, my friend will talk about this.
React Native have a quicker development since only one codebase is required to handle iOS and Android, and everything is in one place. Product development is much quicker. Cross-platform applications are built as single project even though they support different devices, and a large amount of code can be reused between platforms. Next slide, please. In the most simple terms, React Native isn't a newer version of React, although React Native does use it. React, also known as React.js, is a JavaScript library used for building the front end of a website. Similarity to React Native. It was also developed by the Facebook engineering team. Meanwhile, React Native, which is powered by React, let developer use a set of UI components to quickly combine and launch iOS and Android apps. Both React and React Native use a mixture of JavaScript and a special markup language, GSAs. However, the syntax used to render element in GSAs components differ between React and React Native. Additionally, React uses some HTML and CSS, whereas React Native allows the use of native mobile user interface elements. Next slide, please. Code reuse and the knowledge sharing. Working with React Native can dramatically shrink the resources required to build mobile application. Any developer who knows how to write React code can now target the web, iOS, and Android, all with the same skill set. By removing the need of silo developer based on their target platform, React Native let your team iterate more quickly and share knowledge and resources more efficiently. Besides shared knowledge, much of your code can be shared too. Not all the code you write will be cross-platform, and depending on what functionality you need on the specific platform, you may occasionally need to dip into Objective-C or Java. Happily, this isn't too bad, and we will cover how so-called native module work in chapter 7. But reusing code across platform is surprisingly easy with React Native. For example, the Facebook ADS Manager application for Android share 87% of a code base with the iOS version. As noted in the React Europe 2015 keynote, the final application we will look at in this board, a flashcard app has the total code we use between Android and iOS. It's hard to beat that. Next slide, please. And here is a risk and a drawback. As with anything, using React Native is not without its downside, and whether or not React Native is a good fit for your team really depend on your individual situation. The largest risk is probably React Native maturity, as the project is still relatively young. iOS support was released in March 2015, and Android support was released in September 2015. The documentation certainly has room for improvement and continue to evolve. Some features on the iOS and the Android still aren't supported, and the community is still discovering best practices. The good news is that in the vast majority of the cases, you can implement support for missing APIs yourself, which we will cover in the chapter 7. Because React Native introduced another layer to your project, it can also make debugging heavier, especially at the intersection of React and the host platform. We will cover debugging for React Native in the more depth in chapter 8 and try to address some of the most common issues. React Native is still young, and the usual caveat that go along with working with new technology apply here. Stay on the ball. I think you will see that the benefit outweigh the risk. And this is a summary of our presentation. React Native is a exciting framework that enables web developers to create robust mobile applications using their existing JavaScript knowledge. It offers faster mobile development, more efficient code sharing across iOS, Android, and the web without sacrificing the end user experience or application quality. The trade-off is that it is new and still a work in progress. If your team can handle the uncertainty that comes with working with a new technology and want to develop mobile application for more than just one platform, you should be looking at the React Native. In the next chapter, we will go over some of the main ways in the which React Native differ from React for the web and cover some key concepts. If you would like to skip straight to developing, feel free to jump to chapter 3, in which we will setting up our development environment and write our very first React Native application. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you.